All right, futures are flat, 30 minutes ahead of the open. I'm Matt Miller.
I'm Dani Berger. Bloomberg Open Interest starts right now.
Coming up, tempering expectations. Bain warns the AI sector faces an $800 billion revenue shortfall just as Nvidia secures a landmark deal with OpenAI.
And the Fed's road ahead. Chair Jerome Powell speaks today while President Trump's appointee Stephen Miran makes his case for aggressive cuts.
But first, President Trump takes the spotlight at the United Nations as the OECD warns his tariffs will damage the global economy.
So we're expecting that in about an hour or so, Matt. But in the meantime, there are some stocks on the move pre-market, Boeing being one of them. It is up 2.3% this morning. This was a deal announced by the U.S. ambassador to China, calling it huge that China would be buying Boeing aircraft. Bloomberg did report last month that China was looking at buying maybe 500 aircraft from Boeing, so maybe that is that exact deal. So those shares up 2.3%, Matt.
All right, Kenvue shares also rebounding. You can see the gain 5.7%. Of course, Kenvue is the maker of Tylenol, spun off by J&J. It was down more than 7% yesterday as the Trump administration linked Tylenol to autism. Trump urged pregnant women to avoid the pain medication despite a lack of widely accepted scientific evidence supporting the risk. But he said it's not good, Dani. It's not good
Correct.
to take acetaminophen.
And those shares initially fell, and as you're pointing out, recouping those losses. Also, one of our top stories this morning, Matt, Nvidia moving to the downside, down 0.8% after a rally yesterday, following that $100 billion data center pledge to power OpenAI's models. The deal, though, now this morning fueling fears on Wall Street of a bubble as AI companies invest in one another with capital they do not have. Here's D.A. Davidson's Gil Loria.
If the market really was as good as Nvidia and OpenAI said yesterday, there would be other capital available to OpenAI as opposed to the vendor that's supplying the AI trade. We really need to start separating what's real, what's healthy, from what's unhealthy.
And joining us now is Bloomberg Tech's Caroline Hyde. Caroline, there does seem to be a really cyclical nature to this, that you get Nvidia invests in OpenAI, which invests in Oracle, which invests in Nvidia, and around it goes. Is this just recycling capital?
It feels like a money merry-go-round, and everyone's trying to distinguish actually where these GPUs, which could be in the millions, coming from Nvidia with the $100 billion money going towards OpenAI. OpenAI is saying, yeah, we'll keep on buying your next iteration, your Rubin architecture chips, and put them in our future data centers. Are they separate data centers from the ones that OpenAI is already agreeing to build with Oracle, which of course is a $300 billion money that they're allocating to Oracle for their future revenues as well? Is it separate from what they're already been getting from the likes of Microsoft? Nvidia is a strategic investor. We know that. They put money into Coreweave. What's Coreweave? Well, it's a builder of data centers that then uses Nvidia chips. It puts money into Nscale, the European equivalent that is building data centers to use Nvidia chips to build out Europe's own architecture as well. There is a lot of money that is going from seller to buyer, from buyer to seller. Some of it's coming in equity form, some of it's coming in actual future revenue streams. But what we do know is that ultimately, you've got to believe that all of our productivity is going to get a lot better. All of us are going to start paying a lot more to OpenAI for the use of ChatGPT, the 700 million of us that already use it on a monthly or weekly basis. And all of that then suddenly becomes real future money. But this is like one big VC bet on the entire U.S. economy and global, it feels.
It sounds like a house of cards, like a shell game, and I'm not smart enough to follow it, but Bain dug through all the numbers and said that we're going to need $2 trillion in combined annual revenue to fund the computing power needed to meet the projected demand, and that there's going to be an $800 billion shortfall by 2030. That's no small amount of money.
And who's got the shortfall? Because at the moment, Nvidia is making a ton of money. And its chips are incredibly expensive, and it's trying to secure the fact that its future demand is there. So it's basically lining up people saying, I promise to buy chips from Nvidia. Who then is losing out on the money? It's interesting that Micron's going to come out with its earnings after the bell today. we are seeing significant increase in revenue, up to more than 40%. It's, of course, really focusing in on the high bandwidth memory that has become incredibly necessary for these AI accelerators. And people do believe that that sort of revenue pace can continue. But does it vindicate the 40% run-up in shares that we've seen in September alone? All of this is basically the promise that we will have jam tomorrow. But that's what markets do. They forecast future revenue, they forecast future profit. At the moment, Bain thinks that there's a big old hole. The question is, whose hole is it?
Right. Micron shares, by the way, have doubled year to date, rising 95.6%, so almost doubled. Caroline, we're going to be watching out for you on Bloomberg Tech. That's the show she co-anchors with Ed Ludlow. One of yesterday's big laggards is rebounding today. I showed it to you at the top. Kenvue is the maker of Tylenol after it was spun off by J&J. It's fighting off attacks from the Trump administration over alleged links to autism.
So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good. For this reason, they are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary.
For more, we are joined by Bloomberg's Red Brown. He's been reporting on this story, and that, that wasn't the president's scientific analysis of acetaminophen, which is the medicine in Tylenol. But what links do we know exist between acetaminophen and autism?
Well, in general, it seems like the scientific community is kind of taking the opposite position of the president. It doesn't seem like, there are some studies that have come out that have made some claims, but there's questions around the authors of those studies and things like that. So it is quite a muddled topic still. Causation is very difficult to prove with these things as well. But again, kind of the scientific community, the company as well, naturally so, is saying, science points to it's safe for mothers to take. It's the best thing for a fever for a pregnant mother. So right now that kind of is the prevailing sense, despite what the president and the administration said.
And maybe, Red, that's why you are seeing shares rebound the pre-market. We're about a little bit more than that, 20 cents away from getting back to where it was before yesterday's announcement. But still, surely there is some impact. Surely this will mean some people thinking of reaching for Tylenol on the shelf maybe don't.
Yeah, no, that probably is the worst case scenario, I guess, at this point, is that there is maybe some hesitancy from the demand side. But right now, analysts are also kind of coming out and saying that there was no real new data that they presented. So, maybe, people will be informed on this issue now that it's out in the news cycle as well, and will kind of make their own decisions still. It doesn't seem like doctors are going to stop recommending it. There was no kind of language that would suggest that they're going to have to stop recommending this to pregnant mothers. It still is the best treatment, it seems, for a fever in a pregnant mother. They can't take the other pain medicines to reduce fever.
And fevers are really bad for pregnant women.
Exactly. Yeah, fevers are the thing that they should be worried about, right? Is handling that. So, it remains to be seen. I think just one kind of point on the company is this is the biggest brand for Kenvue. It makes up kind of a high single-digit percentage of their revenues. It's a global brand as well, though. So this is just one market for them. They do have kind of the cushion in Europe and everywhere else where this product is sold.
All right, Red, thank you so much for joining us on that. That is Bloomberg's Red Brown. Now, another stock we are watching this morning, Boeing. U.S. Ambassador to China David Perdue says the two countries are in the final stage of what he called a huge aircraft order. Joining us now is Sid Phillip, Bloomberg's global aviation chief correspondent. So it's the return of Boeing as this chip of diplomacy. What might a huge order from China look like?
So Boeing has become this massive sort of part of Trump's diplomacy, and every country that's sort of agreeing trade deals with Trump talks about how they've managed to order some Boeing planes. Sometimes those are recycled deals, but aircraft orders are a big part of that. And we understand that China is in the midst of negotiating as many as 500 aircraft. They're trying to look at the next replacement cycle. So a lot of the Chinese aircraft are getting old now, the fleet's getting old, and so for the Chinese airlines to tap the next phase of growth in terms of replacement of aircraft, they need to order Boeing planes, and they haven't really ordered any since 2017. And so that's basically where the Chinese airlines are looking to replace their planes.
I keep looking at Boeing versus Airbus. And over the past 5 years, Boeing is up 40%, so it's better than, losing money. But Airbus is up 238% in the same time period on a total return basis. Why is the only other major plane maker in the world, and the one that's not American, doing so much better than Boeing?
So Boeing's had a lot of missteps in the past 5 years. I mean, you remember the MAX crisis that occurred just before the pandemic, when we had those 2 fatal plane crashes that led to the MAX being grounded for over a year. And in the run-up, in the sort of rebound since then, Boeing's had a lot of missteps. I mean, we had the Alaska Air blowout last year, which again led to scrutiny on Boeing. So Boeing's had a lot of issues, and they've sort of had to work their way back through that. And so Airbus has had a much easier ride in the past 5 years while Boeing's been struggling.
All right, Sid, great to get your take on this. Sid covers airlines for us really globally. I'm looking at some headlines here from Mickey Bowman at the Fed saying that the Fed is at serious risk of being behind the curve, and it's going to need faster cuts if the job market continues to worsen. Bowman says it's time to act decisively on rate cuts. So really watch the bond markets. I'd take a look at the 2-year to see if that yield moves at all on those headlines. Of course, the market is already pricing in cuts down to 300 basis points as far as the terminal rate is concerned. If you check out WIRP, you can see that.
Yeah, not huge moves on the 2-year this morning, but maybe it's just because it balances out the other Fed speak that we've heard. We've heard from Bostic, Musalem, and Hammack. All of them were quite hawkish, really tempering their ideas of the ability to get rate cuts down. Of course, Bowman sounding a bit like Miran, but Miran was really aggressive in how much he thought we should be cutting at this moment. 12:35, that's when we'll hear from Fed Chair Jerome Powell. So another voice to add into
Maybe
the mix.
she's jockeying for the job.
Haven't heard that one before.
Well, Waller, Bowman.
But she didn't dissent like Miran does. Waller and Bowman did not dissent with a 50 basis point cut. Does that hurt their standing and their running for being the next Fed chair?
Right. Well, I guess maybe she's trying to make up for it with
Possibly.
Statements like this. Coming up, Firefly is dropping the rocket maker's first earnings results as a public company fall short of expectations, and the market cap is then decimated. More on that report next. This is Open Interest. Let's get now to high interest. Look at what's making headlines around the world. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. will defend every inch of NATO territory after Russian jets violated Estonian airspace and drones crossed into Poland. NATO vowed a, quote, robust response, warning it could use military force if needed. Well, what else would it do? Rubio's remarks come as President Trump addresses the UN and prepares to meet Ukraine's President Zelensky. Sempra is cashing in, selling a 45% stake in its infrastructure arm to KKR and Canada's pension board for $10 billion. The move boosts its regulated utility earnings to about 95% and strengthens its credit profile. The deal, expected to close by next year, makes the KKR-led group the majority owner, while Sempra keeps a 25% slice. And as world leaders gather for the UN General Assembly here in New York City, the Secret Service says it dismantled a SIM card network in the city that threatened senior U.S. officials. Agents seized over 300 servers and 100,000 SIM cards. A system investigators say could have crippled telecom networks if left unchecked. The threat bore signs of foreign involvement, according to the Secret Service. I don't really get how 100,000 SIM cards would be a threat to officials. Unless you threw them at the officials, or if they slipped on the SIM cards as they were walking down the street, what would you do with SIM
like a
cards?
banana on the street peel that they slip? No, they just would send them threatening messages, maybe try to extort them. I'm not really sure. Hack their phones. Possibilities. Hackers are very creative.
Got it.
Anyway, on to a stock that we're watching this morning. Firefly's first earnings results as a public company fell short of expectations. Shares cratering this morning, down almost 11%. The rocket maker's revenue missed Wall Street expectations. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg's market correspondent, Nora Melinda. And Nora, now it's trading back below its IPO price to a company that had so much fanfare. What went wrong in these first earnings?
so much fanfare that the company has seen, and we've been seeing so many IPOs just ripping as we have so much of Wall Street optimism really buoying them here. Let's look at Firefly Aerospace in particular here. So it is a $7.2 billion company based in Texas. They do a lot of rocket launches, as you mentioned here. This was their first report. So, of course, we did know that they IPO'd just last month, early last month here. So when you're thinking about a report here, when it's the first inaugural one here, people really have high expectations leading into it. We had Jefferies pointing out the fact that they spent a lot on R&D. Of course, as you called out earlier, they missed on revenue here. So expectations are high, especially if you think about a company that just debuted here. You really want to see some positive results.
What does Firefly do? I recognize that they're space related since we continue to show rocket videos. And I know that that's been a popular theme for companies coming to market this year. So what do we know about this company?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different companies that are now bubbling up in the space sector here. And so if you look at Firefly in particular, I mean, they do a lot of those rocket launches, maybe sending satellites into space, doing payload, just moving different things within space there. So that's what their bread and butter here is. And if you think about some of their major deals, they are kind of branching out into the commercial space. They are branching out into the government. I mean, they made history recently with the partnership that they had with NASA. It landed the Blue Ghost, which is its robotic spacecraft, on the moon. And that was the first privately owned company that was actually able to land upright and intact on the moon. So a major accomplishment for them, and it seems as though they're going to be continuing to have some sort of relationship with NASA moving forward and just really broadening and expanding their presence there.
Very cool. The Blue Ghost. What a sweet
The Blue
name.
Ghost.
Nora Melinda covers well, defense companies as well as space and real estate.
And all markets.
She covers all the markets
she got it all.
for us here on Bloomberg Television. Nora, great to have you with us. Coming up, Deutsche Bank says AI is likely to keep the U.S. from a recession. I mean, I think it was even more strongly worded than that, right? Like,
yeah.
If it weren't for AI,
we'd be in a if it weren't for Nvidia, we'd be in a recession.
We're going to ask New York life investments economist Lauren Goodwin for her take. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Deutsche Bank says that AI capex is propping up the U.S. economy. Global head of FX research George Saravello says, quote, in the absence of tech-related spending, the U.S. would be close to or in a recession this year. He goes on to say that it may not be an exaggeration to write that Nvidia, the key supplier of capital goods for the AI investment cycle, is currently carrying the weight of U.S. economic growth. Lauren Goodwin, economist and chief market strategist, joins us now. Lauren, really wonderful to see you this morning. And maybe this is a little bit more concerning considering we just got that OpenAI Nvidia deal where it seems like they're all just investing in each other. Are we really that close to a recession that is just AI propping us up?
I do think that we're operating in a two-speed economy. And that's not only true with CapEx, where AI is doing the bulk of the work, the rest of the economy isn't. It's also true of the consumer, where the top 10% of spenders are spending half of overall consumer spending in the economy. But this AI activity is real activity. And not only is it real activity, but it is crowding in other elements of the private sector. So you have companies like Nvidia doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but then you have the energy and the data centers and the application layer building up around them. And so I completely agree that it's a bit of a top-heavy trend, but it's real. It's real economic
But you can
activity.
see the circular logic. So OpenAI wants to build data centers. For that, it's going to buy chips from Nvidia. And Nvidia is going to invest $100 billion in OpenAI to buy data centers. That seems like
a Ponzi scheme, a house of cards.
I don't want to say. I'm not going to say Ponzi scheme. You won't hear Ponzi scheme come out of this mouth. No, but it doesn't seem like really legit.
I think it's completely reasonable to be asking the question and to be concerned. And I think it's a very reasonable question to be asking. I think when it comes to the investment case for these companies, the reality, the very uncomfortable reality, is that this absolutely not Ponzi scheme, but this circular economy is going to keep moving until these companies say that it's not, until the demand for these chips from all parts of the globe dissipates or diminishes, we know that that point will come. We know that there will be diminishing returns to compute at some point, whether the application layer can't keep up or we need more power, whatever the case may be. We know that that will come at some point. But the question for investors is that point in the next 3-6 months? I strongly doubt it. We are still so early in the S-curve of this technology that we need to keep asking the question to not get caught, but I think it's too early.
What do you think about the Bain story this morning? So they're saying it's going to take $2 trillion to build up the infrastructure that we need to meet demand by 2030. And that's not a new number. We've heard Bloomberg Intelligence has had a similar number. Moody's has come out with a similar number. But the thing that's interesting about Bain is they say there's an $1 billion revenue shortfall to get there.
So there's a couple things that I think about this research, or this sort of reality, let's call it. The first is that this is an enormous amount of spend, and that type of spend has historically been a limiting factor on new technologies. I mean, even AI itself is not really that new of technology. It took us 50, 75 years to get the compute power to really make it work. It is possible that not only the spend, but the energy capacity to fuel AI could be a limiting factor in its proliferation globally over the next couple of years. But because it has become, and this is the second thing I think is really important, because it has become a matter of economic and national security, I don't think it's only the private sector that's going to be playing a role here. In fact, the public sector has been enormously important in crowding in the private sector on this theme. And it's one of the reasons why I don't think that governments are going to be able to cut back on spending. This is just too important to their vision of the path of the future.
There's no way we can cut back on spending. We've learned that. Lauren Goodwin, just give me flashbacks, though, to 1999. Cisco, laying fiber. It's all seems so familiar.
It does. Wait, I want to be clear, that wasn't a Ponzi scheme, and neither is this. That I don't think that. Just want to be abundantly clear.
We are not alleging any pyramid schemes here. We're going to come back with more from Lauren. Quick check on futures ahead of the opening bell. Looking at a relatively flat trade in equities. Russell futures, though, gaining 0.2%. They were the laggard over the last couple of sessions. This is Bloomberg. All right, just got about 20 seconds to go until the start of trading. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Futures not doing a lot, but we did, of course, hit another record high yesterday on the S&P. I think 66.93 or thereabouts was the closing level. And yesterday we saw the S&P, the NASDAQ, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. That's not the Dow, that's the Russell. Russell futures are up because Russell was really lagging. It didn't hit a new high yesterday. So the small caps, that blip of a comeback maybe is over. Compo Secure ringing the opening bell of the New York Stock Exchange. John Wilk is not only the chief executive officer, but he's also the president of this company, which has more than doubled since it went public. They're up 60% year to date. They offer a range of services and solutions for cryptocurrency and stuff. Down on the NASDAQ, well, there's Jimmy Fallon.
He was looking so hype.
It was.
Pumping his fists.
It was Jimmy Fallon. Super pumped, I guess, about ringing the bell at the NASDAQ. And he hasn't been suspended or fired yet. So
another reason to be pumped.
Yeah, one of the few left standing. Although tonight,
Kimmel's back.
Kimmel's back tonight. Are you going to watch?
I never watch, so this won't change my opinion. That sometimes I look at clips on YouTube, which is maybe part of the problem.
We'll definitely be looking at a lot of clips on YouTube tomorrow morning. We may even show you them on this program.
We might, if you're lucky. All right, some stocks that we're keeping an eye on this morning. Boeing is one of them. The U.S. and China are in the final stages of a, quote, huge aircraft order. That is according to the U.S. ambassador to China, David Perdue. In August, Bloomberg reported that Boeing could sell as many as 500 aircraft to Beijing, so shares higher by 2%, Matt.
All right, I'm watching Kenvue today after the president said taking Tylenol, it's not good. It's not good.
Direct quote.
Recovering from yesterday's losses, you can see up 6.5%. Tylenol, of course, is acetaminophen, and the Trump administration recommended against taking that, especially for pregnant women, because they somehow link it to autism. It's not clear that science supports that, but it's never really been incredibly important to, well, RFK Jr. or President Trump. Really, science, we don't put that much credit in science, right, when it comes to things like pregnant women having a fever and trying to cure it.
You've lost me, I'm going to be honest, but fevers are really bad for pregnant women, and they probably should be taking things to help reduce fevers, like Tylenol.
It would be a good idea. But who knows if there are actually any links between acetaminophen and autism. Let's get back to the economy where we have a better idea, although not a much clearer picture. Lauren Goodwin, economist and chief market strategist at New York Life Investments. It strikes me that members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors are almost as confused about what to do with rates as we are about Tylenol. I mean, we had a number of speakers, including Bostic, come out yesterday and say we should basically be done by now. And then Stephen Miran and Mickey Bowman are saying, like, we risk being behind the curve. We need to cut far more. What is it?
We need to be really careful about the risk of inflation that is not staring us in the eyes right now, but it's very much still a part of this economic story. I think here's what all of us, myself, my colleagues on the street, the Fed, got a little bit wrong this year. When tariff policy came into play, and also when changes in immigration policy came into play, we looked at those drivers and said, goods prices are going to go up. Labor costs are going to go up, so services prices are going to go up, and that's concerning. We haven't seen that in the data yet. And I think what we got wrong there was not the substance of that reality, but the timing. We have a really good example of what a pullback in trade and immigration policy looks like, and that is Brexit. 9 years after Brexit, you didn't see a major disruption or single event in the UK economy that really got them to where they are today. You just saw a sticky, sort of pervasive stagflation-light reality. That's what I'm worried about for the U.S. economy. Now, over the next 6 to 9 months, does that mean we get a major disruption? Maybe we get a couple inflation prints that pull the Fed back, that cause some concern, that cause market jitters. But that real economic impact is probably a multi-year effect. That's what more concerns me about corporate earnings in the long term.
If it's the Brexit comparison, then it's just everything slowly gets a little bit worse. And then it's kind of the boiling frog thing, right? When do you have policymakers actually do something about it? Do you really have Fed officials cut in a way or not cut in a way that would be inconsistent with what Trump's picks for the Fed chair would be in? So what are the risks if it is a Brexit environment where you don't have one event, where everything just slowly gets worse?
So there's lots of risks to that. I think for the economy, we are likely to see, because Fed independence and the credibility of the Fed is so important, it's actually probably their most important policy tool. The Fed is going to have to be data dependent, which means we are going to get a meeting by meeting Fed for the foreseeable future. Where you really see a sort of disruption to a Brexit-like scenario is when you have a CapEx catalyst. I think we do have that with AI. Or you have a growth-focused government, and we may also have that as well. That is not a disinflationary economy in the near term. You can argue that 3-5 years down the road it is, but that's not the case today. And so you really do need to see that CapEx trend continue to keep the market rolling. For investors, those valuations are already high. I don't necessarily have a problem with that in the near term. I think that these are high, important earning companies that are an important fuel of the economy. But it does mean that diversification looks totally different relative to investors' past experience.
Is Fed independence really that important to the bond market? Because we see Stephen Miran, who claims that President Trump doesn't tell him what to do in terms of rate policy, but he has a dot at 2.25% in 2027 when he has growth at 4%. It seems like to some extent Mickey Bowman is trying to curry favor of the Trump administration. I'm not sure if that's fair to say, but she's definitely more dovish than her non-dissent shows in the decision last week. And Is there really no worry that he stacks the board of governors, that the president stacks the board of governors to deal with the regional presidents next year?
There is worry.
But it's not showing up in yields.
That's right. What the market's telling me right now is that is not the base case. Not that it doesn't matter, but that it's not the base case. I think if we see an environment where not only, and this is part of the logic, not only does the Fed have to be stacked with political members, but they also have to act specifically politically, which even Fed members, including the chair, who come from the president's party, who were nominated by the president to begin with, don't act necessarily with political motive. They're looking at the data, they're making decisions based on the data. And so what the market is telling me is that that couple of leaps is not where they are right now. If that were to reverse, I think we would see inflation expectations move higher and long yields move higher, even as short yields were moving lower.
Lauren, there have been instances in the past where you have had a Fed and a Treasury that work together, because you could have an issue where, let's say, the Fed wants to cut and long end rates are going higher, and they work in conjunction with the Treasury to try to bring that down. In that scenario, kind of to Matt's point, maybe a little bit of etching away at Fed independence is an okay thing.
I wouldn't even necessarily call that etching away at Fed independence. What a central bank is trying to do in those circumstances is preserve financial stability. And that is, at the end of the day, what plays a meaningful role in companies maintaining their earnings power, keeping people in the labor force. You can see how sort of the Fed's mandate can sort of like grow and shrink over time, right, as a result of what's happening in the real economy. What we do know is there's two experiences of a true double peak of inflation in this economy. One's after World War II, one's in the 80s. A couple of things that were common there: big disruptions to supply and demand for goods, big disruptions in supply and demand for labor, and a Fed that was being, in these cases, behind closed doors.
Right, Fed independence wasn't a thing before the 50s, right?
Wasn't really a part of the story. And so where we see monetary policy really diverge from the real economy, which right now is on good footing, that's where we see that risk come into play.
Lauren, this has been so excellent. Thank you so much for joining this morning. Always appreciate your time. New York Life Investments economist and chief market strategist, Lauren Goodwin. All right, about 9 minutes into your trading day, let's get a check on where stocks stand at the moment. It is a positive day. Are we going to get another record and a fourth consecutive day of gains for this equity market? It is Broadcom leading us this morning, up 1.5%, what Nancy Tangler used to call the poor man's Nvidia. I don't know if you can call it the poor man's Nvidia anymore, considering all the gains that it has had. To the downside, though, it is Nvidia that is weighing on this market after its $100 billion investment in OpenAI, which just invests that money back into Nvidia, which invests it into OpenAI, which puts it into Oracle, which puts it into Nvidia. Make of that what you will. Amazon shares also down this morning alongside Oracle. Elsewhere, when it comes to the sectors, it is energy pushing us higher, with the price of oil up 1.3%. Materials also gaining off the back of that. Financials are higher. It is Infotech on the bottom of the list. You can guess that most of that is also coming from Nvidia and Amazon, but the overall index basically flat this morning, Matt.
All right. Well, if we closed here, it'd be another record high on the S&P. Coming up, Micron is among the best performing stocks in that benchmark index this year. It's up 96% at yesterday's close. Earnings after the bell could drive it even higher or bring it back down to earth. We'll talk about that next on Bloomberg. This is Open Interest.
Let's get you some top calls. Some of the analyst action that we are keeping an eye on this morning. First up, Lululemon. That gets a downgrade at Baird. The analyst there citing low confidence in its growth prospects and says the company's recent product innovations have been, quote, uninspiring. Shares, though, are higher by about 0.5%. Next up, J&J. That gets an upgrade to a buy at Guggenheim. Guggenheim says its robust pipeline should drive the next era of growth, though shares up 1.4%. And finally, Coreweave gets upgraded to a buy at Melius and Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, for their part, says demand signals are growing too strong to ignore. Melius says that Nvidia's investment in OpenAI is a positive for Coreweave. Even so, a lot of the tech and software players are down this morning, so those shares are down 0.8%, Matt.
All right, we're watching that space very closely, and we're going to be watching Micron very closely as well. It's climbing today, right now up another 1.5% on top of the 96% that it's gained year to date. The options market is pricing in a 9% move in either direction after the earnings. Bloomberg Intelligence tech analyst Jake Silverman is here with us on set. He says the company could see a marginal boost from Apple's iPhone memory upgrade, but Jake, it doesn't look like the stock performance signals anything marginal about this company. I mean, it's just been absolutely on fire. And I look at, quarterly revenue, and it's Climbing. What's the story with Micron?
Yeah, so the Apple boost is a little bit more incremental, but I think it's more just directionally indicative of what's happening overall in the DRAM industry, which is pricing has continued to grow because supply and demand is in an imbalance. There's supply constraints across the industry, especially as Micron continues to invest in boosting capacity for high bandwidth memory, which is really important for AI.
I'll just point out, I always loved the modal function, MODL, on the Bloomberg terminal. And you can look at multiple periods, and it's almost like every quarter they add another billion to revenue. And back in 23, they do $4 billion a quarter, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we're at $11 billion and change expected for the next quarter.
Yeah, I mean, those are big expectations. And I guess, Jake, it's part of the reason why you've seen shares done what they have. Matt and I yesterday were talking about a really good story from the tech team, basically saying boring tech is doing well. That Micron, Western Digital, Seagate. And I'd love to get your response of what Michael O'Rourke at Jones Trading said to that. He said, this is the type of behavior you'd see in a bubble period when people start looking for those secondary and tertiary trades because the leadership group has gotten so expensive. That to me says you are in a very late stages in the cycle.
Yeah, well, so I think it's a little bit important just to keep in mind that, yes, you could call Micron a secondary trade, but high bandwidth memory, one of their major AI products, you can also look at high capacity solid state drives, high capacity DIMMs, which are also important for AI infrastructure buildouts. The demand for all that is very strong. That's what's really driving the pricing increases that we're seeing across memory because it's constraining supply of traditional memory products. So, I mean, you could call it a secondary trade if you want, but ultimately speaking, it's still very much a part of this AI infrastructure build out.
What do you think about the parallels between this AI build out and the web build out that we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s? I mean, one thing, I was talking to Uri and Timmer from Fidelity yesterday on the close, and I will be anchoring the close again today.
Always be plugging.
3 to 5 with Romain Bostic. He was saying, like, look at valuations, right? Micron is trading at 20 times expected earnings. If you look at the whole market, it's only 25 trailing. Nvidia right now is only trading at 40 times expected earnings. And that's the darling of this entire, AI revolution. It's nothing compared to what we saw in 2000. And we'd also be seeing a lot more IPOs. We're not really seeing bubble-ish indicators. Do you agree?
Sure. Well, so I think sometimes I don't always look at earnings power for Micron specifically cycle to cycle. Obviously, in a current upcycle, it's an important indicator of anticipated excitement about the stock. But I look a lot at price to book because as Micron and other memory peers tend to burn cash in down cycles, and so it's better to look at how the balance sheet strength compares cycle to cycle. So I sometimes look at that, and when we look at price to book on a trailing basis, it is actually trading at a reasonable premium to its historical peaks.
All right, Jake, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get those earnings after the bell today. Jake Silverman from Bloomberg Intelligence. Coming up, we are awaiting President Trump's remarks before the UN General Assembly. We're going to head there next to catch up with Tyler Kendall. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. We are just moments away from President Trump addressing the 80th annual UN General Assembly. You can see Brazilian President Lula is addressing the assembly now. For Trump's part, it will be his first appearance at the UN in his second term as president. Joining us outside the United Nations is Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall. Tyler, what are we expecting from the president in just a few moments' time?
Yeah, hey, Dani. Well, we can confirm that President Trump has arrived here at the UN headquarters just moments ago ahead of this speech, which is really expected to set the tone here at the General Assembly. We got a preview from the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt in a post on X earlier today saying President Trump will speak about the return of American strength, in her words, as well as what she called the failures of globalism. We are expecting President Trump to take aim at the institution of the United Nations itself, continuing a trend from his first administration inflation as since January. This White House hasn't paid any of its dues to the UN. Combine that with delinquencies from other administrations. Right now, the U.S. is on the hook for more than $3 billion to the UN, though worth pointing out that our analysts at Bloomberg Economics say that with or without the U.S., the UN is facing a financial crisis at the moment. The Secretary General did declare in January that they were undergoing a liquidity crisis. So that's sort of some of the backdrop here that we could expect from this speech. But we should also point out that it's not just going to be the speech, Matt and Dani. There are some pretty high stakes meetings happening today between President Trump and world leaders, including the Ukrainian President Zelensky. We are watching that very closely, as we know Ukraine is pushing the U.S. when it comes particularly to those security guarantees, and we're going to wait to see if we get any headlines on that. What do we expect to hear from President Trump? He has been pretty vocal on his Truth Social account, just recently printing a small essay about keeping the government open and the lack of negotiations or the lack of participation of the Democratic Party. Is he going to focus in on that or look at bigger picture issues? Well, domestic politics could definitely come into his speech today. Matt, actually, a White House official had confirmed to us at Bloomberg News that he is going to call on countries to tighten their restrictions when it comes to asylum, part of a broader bid to ultimately curb immigration into the U.S. But his post this morning was really about government funding. We'll see if that makes its way into the conversation. The president saying that he doesn't think it's worth his time to meet with Democratic leaders. We had been reporting that there was going to be a meeting on Thursday between President Trump and congressional leaders, including Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, as they try to find a way forward here to fund the government. They're up against that October 1st deadline. A measure just failed in the U.S. Senate that would have kept the government open at least for a short time till November 21st. But at this point, Matt and Dani, there seems to be some pretty a wide area for them to overcome here. Democrats are pushing for some changes, particularly when it comes to health care, also Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire. But they want to see a rollback from some of those changes that were made to Medicaid under the One Big Beautiful Bill. It's hard to see that Republicans are going to compromise on anything that has to do with the president's signature legislation. And Tyler, as you're speaking, so too is Lula from Brazil, saying attacks on sovereignty are becoming the rule, that arbitrary sanctions are becoming the rule. Hard not to see those as a direct comment to the American president. When President Trump was at the UN Assembly last time, when he was last president, he railed against globalism, and it was a lot of members in that assembly that were met with shocked reactions to that. Tyler, will this time be different if he makes those appeals, especially to various countries like Europe, who he had been calling with in the past and still does, for them to fund themselves? Right. It's a great point, Dani. And actually, it does appear that these other countries did come prepared, because ahead of Lula's remarks, a person familiar actually did tell us here at Bloomberg News that he was going to target them against President Trump. I will quickly point out, of course, Brazil, an interesting case in and of itself, considering it is facing that very high 50% tariff rate tied to political concerns. All right, Tyler, thanks very much. Tyler Kendall there reporting live from the United Nations. And we will bring you, of course, President Trump's remarks as soon as he begins to speak. He will come up to the podium right after Lula steps down. Let's take a look at what's going on in stocks. This morning we saw a pretty flat market, and it remains flat in the live trade. 66.95, the level on the S&P 500. The Nasdaq losing about 0.25%. Dani walked you through some of those AI companies that were down. The Russell 2000, though, powering higher, 0.9% after we got remarks out from Mickey Bowman saying that the Fed risks being behind the curve and needs to cut further, adding to the Stephen Miran remarks that we really need looser fiscal policy. And a lot of people would be happy with this market. We have hit record high after record high, but it's been driven by tech. I think to see some broader participation would make people happy, considering the S&P is up 14% year to date. An equal weighted version is only up 8%. Coming up, we'll get those remarks from President Trump. We'll also be joined with Katherine Bordlemay of Goldman Sachs.
We are 30 minutes into the trading day. Welcome to Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Dani Berger. Little change on this equity market, but headed for a fourth consecutive day of gains and of record highs this morning.
Coming up, tempering expectations. Bain warns the AI sector faces an $800 billion revenue shortfall just as Nvidia secures a landmark deal with OpenAI.
And the Fed's road ahead chair, Jerome Powell, speaks today, while President Trump's appointee, Stephen Miran, makes his case for aggressive cuts.
But first, President Trump takes the spotlight this hour at the United Nations as the OECD warns his tariffs will damage the economy. I should point out that the OECD statement, it didn't seem like that damaging. Like global growth is going to come down from 3.2% to 2.9%
Yes.
next year. That's still pretty good.
It is still pretty good, and the U.S. economy is still holding up. I think the Atlanta Fed GDP tracker is at like 3%, so that also is
absolutely, especially considering, I mean, if you'd told economists previously, we're going to raise tariffs from like 2.3% to 19.3%, they would have forecast Armageddon. And it seems to have worked out a little bit better than that.
If you had told equity strategists that we would be trading at record highs, if you told them back on April 2nd, they wouldn't have believed you, which is why everyone is revising their targets higher very, very recently.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's bring in Katherine Bordlemay right now, Goldman Sachs. She joins us here at the desk. She's co-head of Fundamental Equity Client Portfolio Management. That's a mouthful. At GSAM, at Goldman Sachs Asset Management. What do you think about this? I mean, we've ratcheted up tariffs so much, right? By a factor of 10 almost. And yet, the OECD says global growth is only going to drop from 3.2 to 2.9%.
Yeah, things are actually pretty good. I mean, everyone's asking where do we go from here? I do think stocks are set up for success. So a couple things we can look at. First, if you look at the history book, it's really our friend. If you go back 50 years and you pull out periods that look like this, meaning up 30% in about 5 months, 100% of those times in the next 12 months, the market's up another 18%. But actually, what I think is the most important factor today, it's actually really simple. It's about earnings. It's an earnings-driven market. 55% of the year-to-date return is coming from earnings versus, call it, 35% from the multiple. And I think there's a lot of pillars to support good earnings growth going forward. If you look at the policy side, AI, and corporate resilience through the tariff impact. So stocks, we think, have a bright outlook ahead.
Well, usually after a Fed cut, the average gain of the S&P after the first one is 9.6%, and most of that gain over the next year, most of that gain typically does come from multiple expansion and not from earnings growth. So is this time different? Is the cutting cycle different in a way that earnings are going to be more important than multiple expansion?
Yeah, well, it is different because the earnings are coming through. We have that in the hard data today. We think that's going to continue to come through. I'd also add there's a lot of question around valuations. They are high. But if you do a little bit of an experiment and you look at this kind of pre-AI era, U.S. earnings growth was around, let's call it 7%, high single digits. Then if you look kind of post this AI era, they've structurally been more elevated now to low single digits. So you are actually seeing it hit the bottom line at the end of the day. If that comes through, then we think that you can continue to see good equity returns.
I love the EEG function on the Bloomberg terminal, which is the earnings estimates graph. If we pull it up, you'll see that, Q2 earnings came in way higher than we expected. That's the blue line here. The red line is for Q3 earnings at like $67, $68. That's the 7% growth that we're talking about for Q3. Do you expect that to come up? Do you expect us to beat that substantially?
I think we'll stay at least in line. I think consensus is probably showing around there. But under the hood, you are going to see some big differentiation in terms of who are going to be the real winners of AI. But it's not just AI, it's other things as well. So big picture, good. Under the hood, we'll continue to see more divergence, which started to come through last quarter.
There has been a concentration in this market up to the new highs, and it is varied in how stark that concentration is. But it is Nvidia, it is a lot of the Mag 7 that has brought us there. There's the announcement today that Nvidia would be investing $100 billion on OpenAI in their data centers. It's this really circular thing, it feels like, where Nvidia has to provide capital to its customers who are giving it revenue. Does that make the concentration of this market even more troubling if the fates of these companies are increasingly tied together?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. There is concentration risk, and it's only getting more. But if we think about the leaders of the market, the reality is in the near term, it's going to be the big. The big are getting bigger. They have a formidable competitive advantage because of just the pure dollars they can spend in resources and the access to enormous data sets. But with that said, it is very prudent, especially at this part of the market, to find idiosyncratic sources of risk, things that are complementary and different from AI. And you can look in different parts of the market, including outside the US, to do that, to have a more holistic portfolio.
Looking at expectations for the Fed, and we just heard from Mickey Bowman a little bit earlier that she thinks the Fed risks being behind the curve. We're getting to a terminal rate of about 3% at the end of 26, beginning of 27. Is that, you think, the right move for policy? Do you feel like we're restrictive now?
Yeah, I know we don't take a super strong view on the policy. At the end of the day, for stocks, we just need that path to be what it is, which is kind of continuing to go soft. I think our view is 2 more cuts, 25 basis points this year, 2 more 25 basis points last year.
But I mean, the question is, do we expect lower rates? Do you expect a weaker dollar? Are those things tailwinds for corporate earnings going into next year?
Lower rates, weaker dollar, that is the house view, and for sure that is going to be supportive for profitability.
People also love to talk about cash on the sidelines that can be used as firepower, which isn't a real thing because when you sell an equity, someone else buys it. So like cash isn't really on the sidelines. But the Wall Street Journal had the story yesterday that $7.7 trillion of money is sitting in money market funds. Do you look at that and say there's a lot of firepower that can come into this equity market, or has something changed? And just more structurally, people want to keep parts of their portfolio in larger chunks in cash equivalent instruments.
Yeah, talking to clients, I don't feel this enormous amount of firepower, but I do see it in the data. I think there is incremental capital being put to work. I do see clients real time looking at the equity market. They're appreciating that this year is different and that we have many winners. The US is the key winner, but there are other winners around that. So they're taking that incremental capital, they're putting it to work in other parts of the market, down in market cap in the US, outside the US. Is it going to be a $7 trillion trade? Probably not, but you are starting to see that incrementally come through.
What do you think about the outperformance that we've seen internationally? I mean, even if you strip out the dollar and just look at local currencies, and I make this point almost every day, but it's just because it amazes me, right? I lived in Germany for so long, and I have had so many years where strategists would say, like, Europe's going to finally outperform. It's never happened. It's like the small caps thing. But now Germany's up 20%. Madrid is up 30%. The Hang Seng is up 30%. These are all in local currency terms. Are they going to continue that kind of outperformance?
I think so. I think this is early start. So far what we've seen is the market is reacting to the positive sentiment around the stimulus, which is good. We've not yet seen that through the earnings. I think that's the next leg. The reality is, when we speak to companies in Europe, we haven't seen that stimulus come through. It's probably going to start next year in 2026. And this is something that's going to get deployed over a decade. It'll be front-loaded, but it's still going to take a really long time. But I do actually think what's different this time, and I hate to be cliche, but it actually is, in the sense that Europe is completely transitioning their economic model. It's a paradigm shift. They're more inward focused. So on the result of that, you are going to see a structural uplift in the equity market going forward. And a lot of our investors are massively underexposed to that.
Yeah, and we're going to hear from more world leaders at the UN who I'm sure those in Europe are going to be committing to things like defense and infrastructure spending. Katherine, thank you so much for joining this morning. That is Katherine Bordlemay of Goldman Sachs Asset Management. All right, it looks like, speaking of the UN, President Trump is addressing the UN General Assembly. Let's take you live to those pictures here in New York City.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble. Hello, Madam First Lady. Thank you very much for being here. And Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, First Lady of the United States, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, and world leaders. 6 years have passed since I last stood in this grand hall and addressed a world that was prosperous and at peace in my first term. Since that day, the guns of war have shattered the peace I forged on 2 continents. An era of calm and stability gave way to one of the great crises of our time. And here in the United States, 4 years of weakness, lawlessness, and radicalism under the last administration delivered our nation into a repeated set of disasters. 1 year ago, our country was in deep trouble, but today, just 8 months into my administration, we are the hottest country anywhere in the world, and there is no other country even close. America is blessed with the strongest economy, the strongest borders, the strongest military, the strongest friendships, and the strongest spirit of any nation on the face of the earth. This is indeed the golden age of America. We are rapidly reversing the economic calamity we inherited from the previous administration, including ruinous price increases and record-setting inflation like we've never had before. Under my leadership, energy costs are down, gasoline prices are down, grocery prices are down, mortgage rates are down, and inflation has been defeated. The only thing that's up is the stock market, which just hit a record high. In fact, it hit a record high 48 times in the last short period of time. Growth is surging, manufacturing is booming. The stock market, as I said, is doing better than it's ever done. And all of you in this room benefit by that, almost everybody. And importantly, workers' wages are rising at the fastest pace in more than 60 years. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? In 4 years of President Biden, we had less than $1 trillion of new investment into the United States. In just 8 months since I took office, we have secured commitments and money already paid for $17 trillion. Think of it, 4 years, less than $1 trillion, 8 months, much more than $17 trillion is being invested in the United States, and it's now pouring in from all parts of the world. We've implemented the largest tax cuts in American history and the largest regulation cuts in American history, making this once and again the best country on earth to do business. And many of the people in this room are investing in America, and it's turned out to be an awfully good investment during this 8-month period. In my first term, I built the greatest economy in the history of the world. We had the best economy ever, history of the world. And I'm doing the same thing again, but this time it's actually much bigger and even better. The numbers far surpass my record-setting first term. On our southern border, we have successfully repelled a colossal invasion. And for the last 4 months, and that's 4 months in a row, the number of illegal aliens admitted and entering our country has been 0. Hard to believe, because if you look back just a year ago, it was millions and millions of people pouring in from all over the world, from prisons, from mental institutions, drug dealers. All over the world they came. They just poured into our country with the ridiculous open border policy of the Biden administration. Our message is very simple. If you come illegally into the United States, you're going to jail, or you're going back to where you came from, or perhaps even further than that. You know what that means. I want to thank the country of El Salvador for the successful and professional job they've done in receiving and jailing so many criminals that entered our country. And it was under the previous administration that the number became record-setting, and they're all being taken out. We have no choice. And other countries have no choice because other countries are in the exact same situation with immigration. It's destroying your country, and you have to do something about it. On the world stage, America is respected again like it has never been respected before. You think about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or 1 year ago, we were a laughingstock all over the world. At the NATO summit in June, virtually all NATO members formally committed to increase defense spending at my request from 2% to 5% of GDP, making our alliance far stronger and more powerful than it was ever before. In May, I traveled to the Middle East to visit my friends and rebuild our partnerships in the Gulf and those valued relationships with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE and other countries are now, I believe, closer than ever before. My administration has negotiated one historic trade deal after another, including with the United Kingdom, the European Union, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, and many, many others. Likewise, in a period of just 7 months, I have ended 7 unendable wars. They said they were unendable. You're never going to get them solved. Some were going for 31 years, 2 of them, 31, think of it, 31 years. One was 36 years. One was 28 years. I ended 7 wars. And in all cases, they were raging with countless thousands of people being killed. This includes Cambodia and Thailand, Kosovo and Serbia, the Congo and Rwanda, a vicious, violent war that was, Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia, and Armenia and Azerbaijan. It included all of them. No president or prime minister, and for that matter, no other country has ever done anything close to that. And I did it in just 7 months. It's never happened before. There's never been anything like that. I'm very honored to have done it. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. And sadly, in all cases, the United Nations did not even try to help in any of them. I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the 2 things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much. And by the way, it's working now. It just went on. Thank you. I think I should just do it the other way. It's easier. Thank you very much. I didn't think of it at the time because I was too busy working to save millions of lives. That is the saving and stopping of these wars. But later I realized that the United Nations wasn't there for us. They weren't there. I thought of it really after the fact, not during these negotiations, which were not easy. That being the case, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. The only thing that solves war and wars is action. Now, after ending all of these wars and also earlier negotiating the Abraham Accords, which is a very big thing for which our country received no credit, never receives credit, Everyone says that I should get the Nobel Peace Prize for each one of these achievements. But for me, the real prize will be the sons and daughters who live to grow up with their mothers and fathers, because millions of people are no longer being killed in endless and unglorious wars. What I care about is not winning prizes, it's saving lives. We saved millions and millions of lives with the 7 wars. And we have others that we're working on, and you know that. Many years ago, a very successful real estate developer in New York, known as Donald J. Trump, I bid on the renovation and rebuilding of this very United Nations complex. I remember it so well. I said at the time that I would do it for $500 million, rebuilding everything. It would be beautiful. I used to talk about, I'm going to give you marble floors. They're going to give you terrazzo. I'm going to give you the best of everything. You're going to have mahogany walls. They're going to give you plastic. But they decided to go in another direction, which was much more expensive at the time, and which actually produced a far inferior product. And I realized that they did not know what they were doing when it came to construction, and that their building concepts were so wrong, and the product that they were proposing to build was so bad and so costly. It was going to cost them a fortune. And I said, and wait till you see the overruns. Well, I turned out to be right. They had massive cost overruns and spent between $2 and $4 billion on the building, and did not even get the marble floors that I promised them. You walk on terrazzo. Do you notice that? As far as I'm concerned, frankly, looking at the building and getting stuck on the escalator, they still haven't finished the job. They still haven't finished. That was years ago. The project was so corrupt that Congress actually asked me to testify before them on the tremendous waste of money, because it turned out that they had no idea what it was, but they knew it was anywhere between $2 and $4 billion as opposed to $500 million with a guarantee. But they had no idea, and I said it cost much more than $5 billion. Unfortunately, many things in the United Nations are happening just like that, but on an even much bigger scale, much, much bigger. Very sad to see. Whether the UN can manage to play a productive role, I've come here today to offer the hand of American leadership and friendship to any nation in this assembly that is willing to join us in forging a safer, more prosperous world. And it's a world that we'll be much happier with. A dramatically better future is within our reach. But to get there, we must reject the failed approaches of the past and work together to confront some of the greatest threats in history. There is no more serious danger to our planet today than the most powerful and destructive weapons ever devised by man, of which the United States, as you know, has many. Just as I did in my first term, I've made containing these threats a top priority, starting with the nation of Iran. My position is very simple. The world's #1 sponsor of terror can never be allowed to possess the most dangerous weapon. That's why, shortly after taking office, I sent the so-called Supreme Leader a letter making a generous offer. I extended a pledge of full cooperation in exchange for a suspension of Iran's nuclear program. The regime's answer was to continue their constant threats to their neighbors and U.S. interests throughout the region, and some great countries that are right nearby. Today, many of Iran's former military commanders, in fact, I can say almost all of them, are no longer with us. They're dead. And 3 months ago, in Operation Midnight Hammer, 7 American B-2 bombers dropped the 14 30,000-pound each bombs on Iran's key nuclear facilities, totally obliterating everything. No other country on earth could have done what we did. No other country has the equipment to do what we did. We have the greatest weapons on earth. We hate to use them. But we did something that for 22 years people wanted to do. With Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity demolished, I immediately brokered an end to the 12-day war, as it's called, between Israel and Iran, with both sides agreeing to fight no longer. As everyone knows, I have also been deeply engaged in seeking a ceasefire in Gaza. Have to get that done. Have to get it done. Unfortunately, Hamas has repeatedly rejected reasonable offers to make peace. We can't forget October 7th, can we? Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th, even while they refuse to release the hostages or accept a ceasefire. Instead of giving to Hamas and giving so much, because they've taken so much, they have taken so much. This could have been solved so long ago. But instead of giving in to Hamas's ransom demands, those who want peace should be united with one message: release the hostages now. Just release the hostages now. Thank you. Thank you. As we have got to come together, and we will come together, got to get it done. We have to stop the war in Gaza immediately. We have to stop it. We have to get it done. We have to negotiate, immediately have to negotiate peace. We got to get the hostages back. We want all 20 back. We don't want 2 and 4. As you know, I got, along with Steve Witkoff and others that helped us, Marco Rubio, we got most of them back. We were involved in all of them. But I always said the last 20 are going to be the hardest, and that's exactly what happened. We have to get them back now. We don't want to get back 2, and then another 2, and then 1, and then 3. Have this process. No, we want them all back, and we want the actually 38 dead bodies back too. Those parents came to me, and they want them back, and they want them back very quickly and very badly, as though they were alive. They want them. They want them every bit as much as if their son or daughter were alive. I've also been working relentlessly, stopping the killing in Ukraine. I thought that would be, of the 7 wars that I stopped, I thought that would be the easiest because of my relationship with President Putin, which had always been a good one. I thought that was going to be the easiest one. But you know, in war, you never know what's going to happen. There are always lots of surprises, both good and bad. Everyone thought Russia would win this war in 3 days, but it didn't work out that way. It was supposed to be just a quick little skirmish. It's not making Russia look good. It's making them look bad. No matter what happens from here on out, this was something that should have taken a matter of days, certainly less than a week. And they've been fighting for 3.5 years and killing anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 young soldiers, mostly soldiers, on both sides, every single week, from 5,000 to 7,000 dead young people, and some in cities, much smaller numbers, where rockets are shot, where drones are dropped. This war would never have started if I were president. This was a war that should have never happened. It shows you what leadership is, what bad leadership can do to a country. Look what happened to the United States, and look where we are right now in just a short period of time. The only question now is how many more lives will be needlessly lost on both sides. China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one? In the event that Russia is not ready to make a deal to end the war, then the United States is fully prepared to impose a very strong round of powerful tariffs, which would stop the bloodshed, I believe, very quickly. But for those tariffs to be effective, European nations, all of you are gathered here right now, would have to join us in adopting the exact same measures. I mean, you're much closer to this. We have an ocean in between. You're right there. And Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing to them, and it was very embarrassing to them when I found out about it, I can tell you that. They have to immediately cease all energy purchases from Russia. Otherwise, we're all wasting a lot of time. So I'm ready to discuss this. We're going to discuss it today with the European nations, all gathered here. I'm sure they're thrilled to hear me speak about it, but that's the way it is. I like to speak my mind and speak the truth. As we seek to reduce the threat of dangerous weapons today, I'm also calling on every nation to join us in ending the development of biological weapons once and for all. And biological is terrible, and nuclear is even beyond, and we include nuclear in that. We want to have a cessation of the development of nuclear weapons. We know, and I get to view it all the time. Sir, would you like to see? And I look at weapons that are so powerful that we just can't ever use them. If we ever use them, the world literally might come to an end. There would be no United Nations to be talking about. There would be no nothing. Just a few years ago, reckless experiments overseas gave us a devastating global pandemic. Yet despite that worldwide catastrophe, many countries are continuing extremely risky research into bioweapons and man-made pathogens. This is unbelievably dangerous. To prevent potential disasters, I'm announcing today that my administration will lead an international effort to enforce biological weapons convention, which is going to be meeting with the top leaders of the world by pioneering an AI verification system that everyone can trust. Hopefully the UN can play a constructive role, and it will also be one of the early projects under AI. Let's see how good it is, because a lot of people are saying it could be one of the great things ever, but it also can be dangerous, but it can be put to tremendous use and tremendous good, and this would be an example of that. Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. In 2024, the UN budgeted $372 million in cash assistance to support an estimated 624,000 migrants journeying into the United States. Think of that. The UN is supporting people that are illegally coming into the United States, and then we have to get them out. The UN also provided food, shelter, transportation, and debit cards to illegal aliens. Can you believe that? On the way to infiltrate our southern border. Millions of people came through that southern border. Just a year ago, millions and millions of people were pouring in, 25 million altogether over the 4 years of the incompetent Biden administration. And now we have it stopped, totally stopped. In fact, they're not even coming anymore because they know they can't get through. But what took place is totally unacceptable. The UN is supposed to stop invasions, not create them and not finance them. In the United States, we reject the idea that mass numbers of people from foreign lands can be permitted to travel halfway around the world, trample our borders, violate our sovereignty, cause unmitigated crime, and deplete our social safety net. We have reasserted that America belongs to the American people, and I encourage all countries to take their own stand in defense of their citizens as well. You have to do that because I see it. I'm not mentioning names. I see it, and I can call every single one of them out. You're destroying your countries. They're being destroyed. Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody is ever, and nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it. And I have to say, I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed, so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law, but you're in a different country. You can't do that. Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained. What makes the world so beautiful is that each country is unique. But to stay this way, every sovereign nation must have the right to control their own borders. You have the right to control your borders, as we do now, and to limit the sheer numbers of migrants entering their countries and paid for by the people of that nation that were there and that built that particular nation at the time. They put their blood, sweat, tears, money into that country, and now they're being ruined. Proud nations must be allowed to protect their communities and prevent their societies from being overwhelmed by people they have never seen before, with different customs, religions, with different everything. Where migrants have violated laws, lodged false asylum claims, or claimed refugee status for illegitimate reasons, they should, in many cases, be immediately sent home. And while we will always have a big heart for places and people that are struggling and truly compassionate, answers will be given. We have to solve the problem, and we have to solve it in their countries, not create new problems in our countries. And we are very helpful to a lot of countries that are just not able to send their people anymore. They used to send them to us in caravans of 25,000, 30,000 people each. These massive caravans of people pouring into our country, totally unchecked and unvetted. But not anymore. According to the Council of Europe, in 2024, almost 50% of inmates in German prisons were foreign nationals or migrants. In Austria, the number was 53% of the people in prisons were from places that weren't from where they are now. In Greece, the number was 54%, and in Switzerland, beautiful Switzerland, 72% of the people in prisons are from outside of Switzerland. When your prisons are filled with so-called asylum seekers who repaid kindness, and that's what they did, they repaid kindness with crime. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. In America, we've taken bold action to swiftly shut down uncontrolled migration. Once we started detaining and deporting everyone who crossed the border and removing illegal aliens from the United States, they simply stopped coming. They're not coming anymore. We're getting a lot of credit, but they're not coming anymore. This was a humanitarian act for all involved, because on the trips up, thousands of people a week were dying. Women were being raped. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Raped, horribly beaten, raped. On the trip up, the journey up, it was a long walk. It was a long, arduous journey, indeed. And it was also a historic victory against human trafficking throughout the region. What we did was a victory, and we saved so many lives of people that wouldn't make the journey. That journey was loaded up with death. Loaded up with death. Dead bodies all along the roads of jungles to get up. They go through jungles, they go through areas so hot you couldn't breathe. They were dying of suffocation, areas so hot that you couldn't breathe. Dead bodies all over. By them not coming, we're saving tremendous numbers of lives. My people have done a fantastic job in doing what they did, and the American public agrees with it. I mean, I was very proud to see this morning I have the highest poll numbers I've ever had. Part of it is because of what we've done on the border. I guess the other part is what we've done on the economy. Joe Biden's policies empowered murderous gangs, human smugglers, child traffickers, drug cartels, and prisoners from all over the world. The previous administration also lost nearly 300,000 children. Think of that. They lost more than 300,000 children, little children, who were trafficked into the United States on the Biden watch, many of whom have been raped, exploited, and abused, and sold. Sold. Nobody talks about that. The fake news doesn't write about it. With many others, young children who are missing or dead. And we found a lot of these children, and we're sending them back, and we've been sending them back to their parents. They said, nobody knows who they are. They said, where do you come from? And they'll give us a country, and we'll find out, and we'll figure it out, and we'll bring them back to their homes. And the mother and father rush to the door, and their tears in their eyes. They can't believe that they're seeing their son or daughter, their little son or daughter again. We've done almost 30,000 of them so far. Any system that results in the mass trafficking of children is inherently evil. Yet that is exactly what the globalist migration agenda has done, and it's what it's all about. In America, those days, as you know, are over. The Trump administration is working, and we are continuing to work to track down the villains that are causing this problem, and also, as I said, to get back the 30,000 we've already returned. Now I think we're going to have another. We're going to find a lot. You're not going to find all of them. 300, more than 300,000. They're lost or they're dead. They're lost or they're dead because of the animals that did this. To protect our citizens, I've also designated multiple savage drug cartels as far as and you see this, and you see it happening right before your eyes. Let's put it this way. People don't like taking big loads of drugs in boats anymore. There aren't too many boats that are traveling on the seas by Venezuela. They tend not to want to travel very quickly anymore. And we've virtually stopped drugs coming into our country by sea. We call them the water drugs. They kill hundreds of thousands of people. I've also designated multiple savage drug cartels as far as foreign terrorist organizations, along with two bloodthirsty transnational gangs, probably the worst gangs anywhere in the world, MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. Tren de Aragua is from Venezuela, by the way. Such organizations torture, maim, mutilate, and murder with impunity. They're the enemies of all humanity. For this reason, we've recently begun using the supreme power of the United States military to destroy Venezuelan terrorists and trafficking networks led by Nicolas Maduro. To every terrorist thug smuggling poisonous drugs into the United States of America, please be warned that we will blow you out of existence. That's what we're doing. We have no choice. Can't let it happen. They're destroying. I believe we lost 300,000 people last year to drugs, 300,000. Fentanyl and other drugs. Each boat that we sink carries drugs that would kill more than 25,000 Americans. We will not let that happen. Energy is another area where the United States is now thriving like never before. We're getting rid of the falsely named renewables. By the way, they're a joke. They don't work. They're too expensive. They're not strong enough to fire up the plants that you need to make your country great. The wind doesn't blow. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad, so expensive to operate. And they have to be rebuilt all the time, and they start to rust and rot. Most expensive energy ever conceived, and it's actually energy. You're supposed to make money with energy, not lose money. You lose money, the governments have to subsidize. You can't put them out without massive subsidies. And most of them are built in China, and I give China a lot of credit. They build them, but they have very few wind farms. So why is it that they build them and they send them all over the world, but they barely use them? You know what they use? Coal. They use gas. They use almost anything, but they don't like wind. But they sure as hell like selling the windmills. Europe, on the other hand, has a long way to go, with many countries being on the brink of destruction. because of the green energy agenda. And I give a lot of credit to Germany. Germany was being led down a very sick path, both on immigration, by the way, and on energy. They were going green, and they were going bankrupt. And the new leadership came in, and they went back to where they were with fossil fuel and with nuclear, which is good. It's now safe, and you can do it properly. But they went back to where they were, and they opened up a lot of different plants, energy-producing plants, and they're doing well. I give Germany a lot of credit for that. They've said this is a disaster, what's happening. They were going all green. All green is all bankrupt. That's what it represents. And it's not politically correct. I'll be very badly criticized for saying it, but I'm here to tell the truth. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I'm in New York City. I'm feeling a lot safer. Crime, we're getting crime down. And by the way, speaking of crime, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was the crime capital of America. Now it's a totally, after 12 days, it's a totally safe city. Everyone's going out to dinner. They're going out to restaurants. Your wife can walk down the middle of the street with or without you. Nothing's going to happen. My people have done a fantastic job. And yes, I called in the National Guard, and the National Guard took care of business, and they weren't politically correct, but they took care of business. We got 1,700 career criminals out, brought them back to where they came from, the countries where they came from, or put them in jails. Washington, D.C. is now a totally safe city again, and I welcome you to come. In fact, we'll have dinner together at a local restaurant, and we'll be able to walk. We don't have to go by an armor-plated vehicle. We'll walk right over there from the White House. They've given up their powerful edge, a lot of the countries that we're talking about, in oil and gas, such as essentially closing the great North Sea oil. Oh, the North Sea, I know it so well. Aberdeen was the oil capital of Europe, and there's tremendous oil that hasn't been found in the North Sea. Tremendous oil. And I was with the Prime Minister I respect and like a lot, and I said, you're sitting with the greatest asset. They essentially closed it by making it so highly taxed that no developer, no oil company can go there. They have tremendous oil left, and more importantly, they have tremendous oil that hasn't even been found yet. And what a tremendous asset for the United Kingdom. And I hope the Prime Minister is listening, because I told it to him 3 days in a row. That's all he heard. North Sea oil, North Sea, because I want to see them do well. I want to stop seeing them ruining that beautiful Scottish and English countryside with windmills and massive solar panels that go 7 miles by 7 miles, taking away farmland. But we're not letting this happen in America. In 1982, the executive director of the United Nations Environmental Program predicted that by the year 2000, climate change would cause a global catastrophe. He said that it will be irreversible, as any nuclear holocaust would be. This is what they said at the United Nations. What happened? Here we are. Another UN official stated in 1989 that within a decade, entire nations could be wiped off the map by global warming. Not happening. You know, it used to be global cooling. If you look back years ago in the 1920s and the 1930s, they said, global cooling will kill the world. We have to do something. Then they said global warming will kill the world. But then it started getting cooler. So now they could just call it climate change, because that way they can't miss. It's climate change. Because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. Climate change, no matter what happens, you're involved in that. No more global warming, no more global cooling. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know. They actually said during the campaign, they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true. I've been right about everything. And I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail. And if you don't stop people that you've never seen before, that you have nothing in common with, your country is going to fail. I'm the president of the United States, but I worry about Europe. I love Europe. I love the people of Europe. And I hate to see it being devastated by energy and immigration. This double-tailed monster destroys everything in its wake, and they cannot let that happen any longer. You're doing it because you want to be nice. You want to be politically correct, and you're destroying your heritage. They must take control strongly and immediately of the unmitigated immigration disaster and the fake energy catastrophe before it's too late. The carbon footprint is a hoax made up by people with evil intentions, and they're heading down a path of total destruction. You know, the carbon footprint was a big, big thing a few years ago. I remember hearing about the carbon footprint, and then President Obama would get into Air Force One, a massive Boeing 747, and not a new one, an old one with old engines that spew everything into the atmosphere. He'd talk about the carbon footprint, we must do so. Then he'd get in and he'd fly from Washington to Hawaii to play a round of golf. And then he'd get back onto that big, beautiful plane and he'd fly back and he'd talk about, again, global warming and the carbon footprint. It's a con job. At extreme cost and expense, Europe reduced its own carbon footprint by 37%. Think of that. Congratulations, Europe. Great job. You cost yourself a lot of jobs, a lot of factories closed, but you reduced the carbon footprint by 37%. However, for all of that sacrifice and much more, it's been totally wiped out and then some by a global increase of 54%. Much of it coming from China and other countries that are thriving around China, which now produces more CO2 than all the other developed nations in the world. So all of these countries are working so hard on the carbon footprint, which is nonsense, by the way. It's nonsense. You know, it's interesting. In the United States, we have still radicalized environmentalists, and they want the factories to stop. Everything should stop. No more cows. We don't want cows anymore. I guess they want to kill all the cows. They want to do things that are just unbelievable, and you have it too. But you know, we have a border, strong, and we have a shape, and that shape doesn't just go straight up. That shape is amorphous when it comes to the atmosphere. And if we had the most clean air, and I think we do, we have very clean air. We have the cleanest air we've had in many, many years. But the problem is that other countries, like China, which has air that's a little bit rough, it blows. And no matter what you're doing down here, the air up here tends to get very dirty because it comes in from other countries where their air isn't so clean. And the environmentalists refuse to acknowledge that. Same thing with garbage. In Asia, they dump much of their garbage right into the ocean. And over about a 1 week and 2 week journey, it flows right past Los Angeles. You've seen it. Massive amounts of garbage, almost too much to do anything about, flowing past Los Angeles, past San Francisco. And then somebody will get in trouble because he dropped a cigarette on the beach. The whole thing is crazy. The primary effect of these brutal green energy policies has not been to help the environment, but to redistribute manufacturing and industrial activity from developed countries that follow the insane rules that are put down to polluting countries that break the rules and are making a fortune. They're making a fortune. European electricity bills are now 4 to 5 times more expensive than those in China, and 2 to 3 times higher than the United States. And our bills are coming way down. You probably see that our gasoline prices are way down. You know, we have an expression, drill, baby, drill, and that's what we're doing. We're going to be much lower in a year from now. but they've come way down over the last year. As a result, every air conditioner is like very uncommon to see one in some of these countries because the electric costs are so high. So while the U.S. has approximately 1,300 heat-related deaths annually, that's a lot, Europe loses more than 175,000 people to heat deaths each year because the costs are so expensive you can't turn on an air conditioner. What is that all about? That's not Europe. That's not the Europe that I love and know. All in the name of pretending to stop the global warming hoax. The entire globalist concept of asking successful industrialized nations to inflict pain on themselves and radically disrupt their entire societies must be rejected completely and totally, and it must be immediate. That's why in America I withdrew from the fake Paris Climate Accord, where, by the way, America was paying so much more than every country. Others weren't paying. China didn't have to pay until 2030. Russia was given an old standard that was easy to meet, a 1990 standard. But for the United States, we're supposed to pay like $1 trillion. And I said, this is another scam. The fact is, the United States has been taken advantage of by the world for many, many years, but not any longer, as you probably noticed. I unleashed massive energy production and signed historic executive orders to hunt for oil, but we don't have to do much hunting because we have the most oil of any nation anywhere, oil and gas in the world. And if you add coal, we have the most of any nation in the world. Clean, I call it clean, beautiful coal. You can do things today with coal that you couldn't have done 10 years ago, 15 years. So I have a little standing order in the White House. Never use the word coal, only use the words clean, beautiful coal. Sounds much better, doesn't it? But we stand ready to provide any country with abundant, affordable energy supplies if you need them, when most of you do. We're proudly exporting energy all over the world. We're now the largest exporter. In the United States, we want trade and robust commerce with all nations, everybody. We want to help nations. We're going to help nations. But it must also be fair and reciprocal. The challenge with trade is much the same with climate. The countries that followed the rules, all their factories have been plundered. It's really sad to watch. They've been broken. They've been broken by countries that broke the rules. That's why the United States is now applying tariffs to other countries, and much as these tariffs were for many years applied to us, uncontrollably applied to us. We've used tariffs as a defense mechanism under the Trump administration, including my first term, where hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs were taken in. And by the way, we had the lowest inflation, and now we have very low inflation. The only thing different is that we have hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into our country. But this is how we will ensure that the system works for everyone and is sustainable into the future. We're also using tariffs to defend our sovereignty and security throughout the world, including against nations that have taken advantage of former U.S. administrations for decades, including the most corrupt, incompetent administration in history, the sleepy Joe Biden administration. Brazil now faces